the lesson number 6 of the Zero to Hero Power Automate session, mentorship session, I should say. Today is a very special day. We have the superhero or the rock star or everything in between, Eliza Benitez with us. She has a lot of cool content to share with the community. First and foremost, Eliza, thank you so much for making yourself available to us. We are very excited to learn from you. And the floor is yours. You have
Thank,
a lot of
thank
time.
you. Yeah, thanks. Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening where you are. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited to be here because if you know me, I'm so passionate about Power Automate and the wider Power Platform. And today I'm going to be showing you some different low code notifications that exist for Dynamics 365 or Dataverse. So if you didn't catch our beginning conversation, I live in the capital city in New Zealand. So if you are familiar with the rugby team, the All Blacks, or the movie The Lord of the Rings, or The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, that's all New Zealand. And fun fact, I've actually been to where they filmed The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise when there's like a scene where they're doing their training. Yeah, I've been there. It's really cool. And I've also been up that mountain that's in the backdrop of the movie. And yeah, I've been a consultant for over 10 years. I'm now 4 years into being a Microsoft MVP in business applications. I started with Dynamics CRM4 version 4 in 2009, and then my journey with Power Automate started in 2018, all thanks to another well-known person in our community, Shane Young. So Shane Young did an EDX course back in the day for Power Platform, and through him, that's where I became interested and fell in love with Power Automate, which was known as Microsoft Flow back then. And in my spare time, I like to bike. So another fun fact about me, I didn't know how to bike. And at the end of 2019, I taught myself how to ride a bike. So now when I have any spare time, I bike because I'm just making up for the lost years of not knowing how to bike or biking. And yeah, I also film for my YouTube channel. I have a series called What the Flow. So if you want to learn all things Power Automate, come and subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right, so for the agenda, I'm going to quickly cover what is Dataverse because the low code notifications that I'm showing today is to do with Dataverse or Dynamics 365. Then I'm going to jump into the low code notification options that I'm going to demo today, followed by the use case. Now, the reason why I'm providing a use case is so that you can understand the context of why notifications is useful to give you some ideas of how you can do it in your company that you currently work in. And then we're going to dive into the demo, and then I'm going to briefly talk about a third option that I couldn't get working. I didn't hear back from Microsoft support, and you'll understand why. And then we're going to open up the floor to questions. So without further ado, let's talk about Dataverse. So here's a very, very brief explanation. And it's not just a database with a front-end interface that allows you to store data in a set of tables. It's actually more than that, but that's what most people see it as a different option of storing data other than SharePoint. So the next option is, oh, why don't we use Dataverse? But it's actually more to that than meets the eye. So on this slide is the actual official explanation of why you should use Dataverse and what it's about from the docs.microsoft.com site. So down at the bottom of the screen, I have a QR code. So just grab your phone, scan it, and it will take you to the docs.microsoft.com page. But what I really want to focus on is actually the next slide. So in this next slide is a diagram. Now, this is a diagram that was created by another fellow MVP who's based in New Zealand. His name is Eric, and he actually wrote a great blog post. So again, if you want to have a look at that blog post in detail, grab your phone out, scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen. And what I do want to draw your eyes to is the screen on the right. So in that screenshot, he's highlighted in purple. These are the things that already come with Dataverse, and that's what I mean by it's more than meets the eye, because there's a lot of capability that you can get with Dataverse that you probably can't get with any other application or data source that exists out there. So you've got inbuilt capability now within Teams where you can create your own Dataverse environment to allow more collaboration amongst people within your organization. Then you have the built-in front-end user interface that's ready to go, basically. It's just a matter of A, creating columns, B, moving those columns onto a form, and then C, publishing the form, and then adding the form, so D, to the actual app itself. And it's all very straightforward. And then you get the bigger extended capabilities of the Power Apps component framework. So if you are a code first developer or a pro code developer, you can do some additional functionality that can lie on top of your model-driven app, the front-end user face. And then you've got Power Apps portals. So Power Apps portals, it's all native to Dataverse. It's all inbuilt into the Dataverse model. So there's no, essentially, you don't really need a pro developer or code first developer to spin up a portal. It already has that inbuilt integration. So as you can see, Dataverse is quite powerful in terms of being able to not only be a place to store your data, but to do more with that data by making it either visible to different end users, applying some automation to make processes easier, surfacing that data onto a portal that's already inbuilt, and then extending it by making cool Power Apps component framework controls. And yeah, and then you can do lots of queries on it. Sorry, so that's the middle layer. So I highly recommend checking out Eric's blog post because it does go into detail of why you should use Dataverse beyond the official docs.microsoft.com article. Okay, so putting that aside, now I want to focus on the low-code notification options that are available today. So the first one is using the preview in-app notification feature. Now, this is specifically for model-driven apps. So as I mentioned, in case you're not familiar with Dataverse, model-driven apps is the front-end user interface and being able to interact with that data that's stored in your Dataverse. And then the second option is using Power Automate and Microsoft Teams. Now, I'll talk about why this is also another good option to use. And then the third one that I wanted to show you all today, but I couldn't get working in time, is the Outlook actionable cards, because not many people know that this exists today. And that's something that I did want to cover, but I will point you to blog posts that you can take a look at so that you can check it out in your own time. All right. So for the use case, and as I mentioned earlier, this is for you to understand and think about how you can start using notifications within your own company, or if you are a consultant for a Microsoft partner and you're tuning in today, you could start thinking about how you could possibly apply this to the customers that you work with, whether it's Dynamics 365 customers or Dataverse customers. So for the use case, it's for an insurance organization. So in an insurance organization, you've got members, and those members can submit what we call an insurance claim as part of their insurance that they've taken up with you. And so the use case is as a claims assessor. So a claims assessor is someone who is lodging the claim on behalf of a member. Claims assessor is the person who is required to do further investigation on a claim that's been submitted. So they can get notified when a claims advisor, so a claims advisor is the one who deals with the member, has entered a new insurance claim into the system. And so they need to be notified so that they can assign it to themselves, and then they can go ahead and review the insurance claim. So that's the use case today. So whenever an insurance claim is created, and as soon as it needs to get escalated to a claims assessor for further investigation, the claims assessors and the claims team need to be notified. So with the end users, these are the people that we're going to be working with today. So we have Christy, who's a claims advisor. So Christy's the one who would have been on the phone with a member or would have been told, hey, this member needs to lodge a claim with us. And so she's looking at it. And then Christy's the one who's going to escalate it to the claims assessors, which are Alex and Adele. And then you've got the citizen developer, who's the administrator, so now it's me, that's doing all of the configuration for this automation. So that's what we're going to cover. So demo time. So the first one that I'll go through is the preview feature of in-app notifications. And we have a special guest that's tuned in who's also going to back me up if I stumble. We've got Ivan Fitzko all the way from beautiful Croatia. So thanks for tuning in. So I'm going to go through his tool that he's created for XRM Toolbox to help you makers and heroes to enable this preview feature in your Dataverse environment. And then you can start playing and configuring the in-app notifications. So I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint and then I'm going to head over to my browser. Okay. So in terms of the in-app notifications, it's essentially going to appear as a bell. So there's an icon in here, and when you hover over it, it'll tell you, okay, these are notifications that you have that are pending. And when you click on it, this is what it's going to look like. So this is what the notification looks like as part of the model-driven app preview feature. So they call this in-app notifications. Now, there's another term that you could call this, and it's called a toast notification. Why is it called a toast notification, you ask? Well, if you think about it, when developers originally came up with this concept, they were calling it pop-up notifications. And to make it something more easier for people to understand, they use the concept of toast. So with toast, think about the toaster that you have in your kitchen. You put slices of bread in, and when it's ready, the toast pops up. And so that's the history behind a toast notification. So if you didn't know that, there you go. There's some today learning for you. And as part of this in-app notifications preview feature, when you have a look at the documentation, it's going to tell you that you need to go to your browser and do this. Now, for people who are makers who aren't familiar with, tinkering around with your browser, this could be a bit of a daunting task. And that's where Ivan's tool comes in handy in XRM Toolbox, which is what I'm going to show you now. So in terms of XRM Toolbox, it's a new app it's a new tool that's available. So you install XRM Toolbox. It's straightforward to install, and then you select this from the library of tools. And then once you click on it, it's going to load the tool for you. So I'm just going to go through the logistics of this. So over on the left-hand side is where you can view all of your apps that are available within your Dataverse. So what I mean by that is if we go back to my browser that has a model-driven app, when I click in the header over here in the menu, these are all of my apps that are available. So whatever apps that your user has access to is what you're going to see in the XRM Toolbox. So that's why I'm seeing these two. So these are the two apps that I have access to as a user. Then over here on the right, we've got the notification status. If you see this as red, it means that the notification in-app preview feature is not enabled. So with one click, literally one click, it'll then enable it in your environment versus having to go and put some code in your browser. Like that's something that you don't really want to do, right, as a maker. And that's really one of the value adding benefits that come with this tool is that in one click you can enable it. So thank you, Ivan. If you want to do clapping hands for him, that would be appreciated. Then you can also perform a test, but I'll come back to that later once we build out our notification. And then in terms of the get code, if you want to do some more capabilities with it. If you are a pro developer or a code first developer, you have these options in here. If you are a maker or a citizen developer, you're more likely to use this option. So I'm going to cover that as well, and why this is also a really cool feature of the tool. Okay, so in terms of the anatomy of a notification and how you would use this with the layout of your notification, is that where you see newly created, that is your title. And then where you see some text in here, that's your body. And then for any clickable actions for an end user to do, that's what we call an action, and you would create it here. So we'll go through that right now. So if you want to change the title to something different, so something like a claims assessor required, you would simply type it in there and you can see it live in detail on the right hand side. And then same with the body. So let's say a new claim has been raised and an assessor is required. But then you could do things like apply some formatting. Sorry, I didn't highlight everything, but you get the drift. So now I've put that in bold. If I want to do a hyperlink, I can do that. So if I just put the 0 to hero hyperlink in here, just as an example. It's then going to insert it as a hyperlink. So then as an end user, if they click on that, when they see that notification appear in the model-driven app, it's then going to direct them to the link. Then you have the ability to add in a photo as well. So if I just grab a photo, sorry, just bear with me 1 second. So something like it'll then insert it. Well, it should. I did test this out, so I'm not sure why it's not working today, but trust me, it does. And then we also have the toast type timed or hidden. So if it's timed, it means that it's going to show within the notification. Sorry, let me just go back to the model-driven app. Show here, so immediately after some time. If it's hidden, it means that it's not going to pop up. It's not going to be a toast notification. You're only going to see a number value, so either 1, 2, or 3, to give you an indication of how many notifications that you have. So again, if it's hidden, you're not going to see the pop-up. You'll just see like a number value in here that will tell you the number of notifications that you have to view. Otherwise, if it is timed, then it'll eventually pop up as you, as an end user, are clicking around and working within your app. So going back to the toolbox, we also have the expiry, so immediately deleting the notification after some time. You then have different icons that you can select. So for example, if I change it to success, it's going to show a tick. If I change it to failure, it's going to show a cross. And then you have the ability to add your custom icon. Now this does need to be uploaded as a web resource within Dataverse. So I'm not going to cover that today. We're going to stick with one of the icons that are available. And then here comes the fun part when you want to provide clickable actions or call to action for the end users. So for here, you could do something like view insurance claim. And then you have the ability to open it as a dialog, inline, or new window. If I click inline and let's say I now select record, I then need to provide details. Okay, so what table do you want to display? So now if I scroll all the way down to insurance claim, and then you also have the ability to select the form that you want them to view. So if I select that, you'll then see that there's a URL in here. And then it's also going to show you the GUID value of that particular insurance claim. So when I click create, again, you're going to see it displayed in the preview over here on the right. And then if we want to add more actions, you can do that as well. So let's say I want to say view member. And this time I'm going to use new window. And I'm still going to allow them to select a record. And then we're going to scroll all the way down and select our member table. And then again, you can select the forms that you want the end user to see. So once you click create, again, it's going to show it in there on the right-hand side. So once you've pretty much set out the foundation of your notification, the next thing is, okay, well, what do I do with this? So as a maker or a citizen developer, you would want this notification to be triggered automatically, right? And so that's where Power Automate comes in handy. And so this button up here is going to provide you with some indication of what you need to do in Power Automate. Now, this will make sense shortly once I head over to Power Automate. But what I do want to show you is this data field. This data field is essentially the actions that you see in here. So when you copy and paste this into your action in Power Automate, it's essentially ready to go other than configuring things like the GUID of the record. So I'm going to head over to Power Automate and I'm going to show you what that flow looks like. So this is my flow that I prepared in advance. And when we click on edit, I will have a trigger that tells me whenever a new insurance claim is created. And if the field for the assessor is set to yes, so in other words, doesn't require an assessor, this flow is going to be triggered. And then you have the ability to create a new row, and we want to select the notification table. And remember those fields that you saw in XRM Toolbox? That's essentially what is seen in here. So I'm just going to quickly head back to my PowerPoint slide just to show you, again, break it down for you so that you as a maker or a citizen developer understands how does Power Automate map to what you see as an end user when it comes to the notifications. So again, over here on the left, if we have a look at number 1, it's the table name. So it's essentially the notifications. Then as a title, we've got the claim assessor required, which is this. And then we've got the body, which is the text that we would have created in the tool in XRM Toolbox. And then in the data, each of these rows that you're seeing in here that I've highlighted is essentially your action that's in the notification. So I know this kind of looks scary if you're seeing this for the first time, but it's not. It's essentially a representation of the automation, and over on the right hand side is a representation of the actions that the end user is seeing. And then we've got number 6 up here, which is the icon type. So again, if you want to change this to success, failure, or select one of your custom icons, this is the field that you would need to update in Power Automate. Oops, sorry. Oh, it's being cut off. But like at the bottom, there's also a reference to the user, which is essentially the GUID that represents the user. So here, this is Alex, who's one of the assessors. So if I just go back to my Power Automate, so if I just go back in here, that's essentially what we've done. So we've just copied what was in the XRM Toolbox tool, and then we've pasted it here. And then the only thing that I'm updating is the reference to the actual GUID of the record. So what I mean by GUID, so again, for people who are new here in the call to Dataverse, every record has what we call a GUID, which is essentially an ID. And when you have a look closely at the browser, there is a URL path, and in that URL path, there's a bunch of strings that represents the ID of that particular record that you're seeing. So when you want to reference it in Power Automate, all you need to do is, if I just click this guy, use your dynamic content, and then you want to enter in the name of the field, which is insurance claim, and where it says unique identifier is essentially a GUID. You select that, and then it'll appear up here. So let's just try that again. But it's pretty much all straightforward as a maker and a developer. Now, one tip that I do have for you is if you do use the navigation target of new window, and we have a look at it again in the XRM Toolbox. in here, it's generated this URL for you. And that'll work if you use it inline or the dialog value as a navigation target. But when you want to use the new window as a navigation target, just remember that you do need to provide the full URL path. So what I mean by that is it's going to include the details of the Dataverse environment as well as the app ID. If you partially provide the URL path like this, it's going to fail. And that's because the user is going to click on the link and it's going to open up a brand new browser tab. And so by opening a brand new browser tab, it needs the full URL path. So just remember that. And once you're all done with setting up your notification, you're pretty much ready to go. Oh, sorry. One crucial thing I forgot to tell you is the owners. So again, you would just need to provide a value of the user that you want this notification to be created for. For this demo, I've just set it to the administrator, but what I will show you next is how to actually create more than one notification for all users that are under a particular team in Dataverse. So if you want to test it, there's two ways that you could do this. The first way is to do it through Xrm Toolbox. So again, I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to exit out of that dialog, and then I'm going to click on test. When I click on test, it's going to ask you, all right, who do you want this test notification to be sent to? And so in here, you can select all the users that are available in your environment to test with. So I'm going to test with Alex. And now when I click on test, Xrm Toolbox is going to go ahead and send in the notification. So what's happening behind the scenes is that a new notification is being created, and then eventually it's going to make its way to the end user. So let's head over to Alex's browser. So here I am in the model-driven app as Alex Wilbur. So I am one of the assessors. And so if I'm, going about with my everyday activity and I'm working within my app, eventually we're going to see the notification appear. So I'm just going to keep clicking around until it appears. So there you go. Here we go. So over on the right-hand side is that lovely notification that I created earlier with you. And as you can see, it slowly goes away, but I have an indication here that I've got a new notification. So that's what the number 1 represents. And then again, when I click on this, we can see this happening. So just to demonstrate with another notification that I created earlier. So when I click on view claim, this opens up in line in the same window. And within that action, we only provided a partial URL path. But remember when I said when we provide the navigation target as a new window, it's going to open up a new browser window. So now when I click this action, it opens up my new browser window, and it does it without an error because I provided the full URL path. So that's something just to be aware of. So that's a difference between the two. You can either have the notification open directly within the same browser tab that the end user is viewing the notification in, or you can drive them to a brand new browser tab, and that's all because of that navigation target property. And this is all in the documentation, by the way. Okay, so that's how you would do it if you were sending it to a single user. So in here, you provide that reference. But in reality, when we are working with notifications, we want more than one user to be notified. So how do you do that? So again, using Power Automate, we are going to use the concept of referencing an actual team. So in here, I have a list rows action, which is going to grab a table called team memberships. So you're probably thinking, what is this team memberships table? I've never heard of this. Well, let me tell you. Let's head into Dataverse. And in Dataverse, we have what we call security. So security is what I briefly mentioned earlier about when we were talking why Dataverse, why you should use Dataverse. And that's because you can apply layers of security. So if I use the example of again, an insurance company. So you could have a team that is HR and payroll. You could have a team that is insurance claims. You can have a team that is, let's say, sales and marketing. So you've got 3 teams. Now, if you are an HR and payroll and there's information that someone in insurance claims or the sales and marketing team should see, you can define that with security and Dataverse. And so part of the concept of teams in Dataverse is a way of allowing you to group your users under a team. So when this loads, I'll be able to show you. And within that team, you can assign who your users are that belong to that team. And that's what we call team membership. So what we're trying to do in Power Automate is say, hey, I want you to grab these users who are the claims assessors from the claims team. And then I want you to create notifications for each of those claims assessors so that when they're working in the app, they'll see the notifications appear. So that's what team memberships is. Okay, so now I've got this loading. So in here, for example, as I mentioned, we've got the claims team, and within the claims team, we've got our users, and the users that I have in there can be a mix of claims advisors or claims assessors. So we've got Adela and Alex, who are our claims assessors. But in reality, you would have a lot more team members. So that's what this team memberships table is. And then in the filter row, you have the ability to reference which team you want to pull these members from. And so again, if we have a look at the record here, oh, does it show? Hang on, let me just do this. It's going to have a GUID at the end. So that's how you can grab that ID. Now, what I am showing you here is a straight up reference to that GUID. Ideally, you would be using environment variables, but for today's demo, I'm going to keep this simple. So once you grab your team members from that particular team, so in other words, this is my claims team, I then want to loop through each of those team members, and then I want to create a notification for each of those team members. And so the only difference in here from what I showed you earlier is in here, we're now dynamically referencing each of those users. So if I go back to my teams in Dataverse, it's referencing these users. So for every member in this team, I want my Cloudflow to create a notification for it. So now I'm going to show you this in action. Everything else is the same other than adding this additional action and then updating the owner field to dynamically reference the user ID so that the notification can be created for each one. So I'm just going to delete this. And let's go ahead and save this. And then I'll show you this in action. So fingers crossed that the demo vibes are with me today. Okay, so now that that's saved, I'm going to head back and we'll demo this. So I'm in here logged in as Christy, who is a claims advisor. So I'm going to head over to a member. And let's say I'm on the phone with a member. I need to go and create my insurance claim for this particular member. So now in here, I just click on new insurance claim. That's going to bring me up my form. I can then select the insurance policy that is applicable for this particular member. I can then set the date that they want this claim for. I can give an estimate of, let's say, 15,000. And then at some point, if I think that this needs an assessor, I can update this field from no to yes and hit save. And so what's going to happen is that now my Cloudflow is going to be triggered, and that's because I've set the trigger to only trigger when this field equals yes. So let's head over back to my Cloudflow. Let's hit the refresh button, and you can see that it has succeeded. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring up Alex and Adele side by side so that you can see the notifications happening at the same time. So over here on the left is Alex, and over here on the right is Adele. So I'm going to keep clicking around until it shows up. So we can see that this one has showed up for Alex. And so now if I just transfer over to Adele, and if I click around, we should see it show up for Adele. I think this one's old, so let me just give it a few more seconds. Okay, here. So here we go. So this is now the notification is now showing for Adele. So again, same functionality. If I could click on view claim, it's going to open it up directly. Otherwise, if I click on view member, it will open up in a new target window. So just as a recap, if you do want to notify more than one user in a team, more than one user for a notification, you can use the out-of-the-box capabilities of Teams, which is allowing you to group certain users underneath a team. So again, as an example, we've got a claims team, and in here, I've got my claims advisors and my claims assessors. So that's the first notification method. Now, if you paid attention to this, this notification method will work if your users are working and living within your model-driven app. In other words, the claims app. If they are not in the app, so in other words, let's say they're in Outlook or they're doing some other processes, they're not going to know that this notification exists unless they're in the app. So that's where I'm going to show you a second method with it, which is, oh, I'm hearing some echo, which is using Power Automate and Microsoft Teams adaptive cards. So I'm going to now talk about that. And we're going to switch over to my other browser that's going to briefly talk about adaptive cards. So if you are a citizen developer or a maker who has been following the Power Platform since the beginning, so around 2016, you would probably be familiar with the name Audrey Gordon. Who is Audrey? So Audrey is actually one of the original PMs who worked on Power Apps, and then she moved to the Power Automate team, and then now she's in the Microsoft team. But in her time in the Power Automate team, she did amazing stuff for all of us that we can all use today. And she has a video on how you can get started with adaptive cards. So I'll quickly talk about what adaptive cards are. It's essentially a way of displaying your data in an interactive format, as well as in a more visual format compared to just, you know, lines of text that you normally are used to when you receive like a notification in email or in Teams. So an adaptive card is essentially taking your data and organizing it in a way that makes it better and more simple for an end user to understand, as well as also provide some call to actions for that end user to follow up with. So in the adaptive cards designer, this is what it looks like, by the way, there are a bunch of templates that you can select, as well as where you would want this to live. So here are your different options. So as you can see, there's quite a few in here. And so if you select Microsoft Teams Lite, it's going to show you, okay, this is what that sample is going to look like. And then you can go ahead and configure this the way you want it to. So let's say I don't want this. I could just hit the X button in here. I can also change this. So this essentially would be my title. So I'll be like new claims assessor required. And then if I don't want to keep this date timestamp, I can simply remove that. I can replace this with a particular icon. So at the moment, it's showing some random person as a profile image, but one of the things that I like to do is use an icon. So now if I go back to here and click small and just grab this URL, I'm going to copy it, and then we're going to paste it in this URL field. There we go. You can now see that the information icon is now in there. And then same thing in here, we can provide some text. So a new claim has been created, which requires an assessor. And then the next cool thing that you can do is provide some keys. So in other words, key value pairs. So in here, I can type in something like the member. So who is this claim for? And then we can say the insurance policy. and then things like the sum insured, so how much have they been insured for, and then what's the estimate of and then the call to actions down here. So you've either got show card or open URL. I'm going to stick with the open URL. And then in here is where you can say things like view insurance claim, and then you can add some others. And so basically, if you now look down here on the left, what you're seeing down here on the left is essentially what makes up this card. So all this scary stuff that you see down on the bottom left is essentially the adaptive card. So this is what the adaptive card will look like with this. And again, you pretty much just copy and paste this into your Cloudflow, and then you connect the dots together. So let's go and do that. I'm now going to leave adaptive cards, and we're going to jump into my Cloudflow. Okay, so going back to my other browser, I'm going to turn this flow off, and we're going to turn this flow on. And I'm going to show you what this Cloudflow looks like. So I'll just wait for it to turn on. There we go. Okay. So the trigger is exactly the same. And what we're doing different is we're adding a bunch of more actions. So the first action that I'm doing is we want to retrieve the member from this insurance claim. So if I just go back to my model driven app, this is what my insurance claim record looks like. I have this member field. And so in my Cloudflow, we're saying, go and grab that member. The next thing that we're doing is exactly the same, but it's for the insurance policy. So again, if I go back to my app, we've got a reference to the insurance policy. So this action is saying, go and grab that insurance policy. Okay, now the next two connectors is again something that Audrey Gordon created in her time in the Power Automate team. This, in my opinion, is an underrated connector, and I'll tell you why. So I'll head over to my PowerPoint, and we'll go ahead and look at this. All right, so in my PowerPoint slide, you can see that the integer values at the bottom don't have any formatting. And that's because when you work with values from other applications, and then you want to relay into something like a Microsoft Teams adaptive card, or another example is an Outlook message, there's going to be zero formatting applied. And that's because the value that you're wanting to display either in an Outlook email or an adaptive card is just simply a string value that Power Automate is telling it to display with zero formatting. And if you look at the forums and the threads on how to do formatting of numbers when you want to share it in the form of an email or an adaptive card, there's so many threads in there, and there's a lot of complicated things that can be done. So Audrey took that feedback and made something that was much more simple. And that was this format number connector. And so if you click on the drop down, it's going to give you options on how you can format a dollar amount value the way you want it. And so that's what I'm doing in here. I'm saying grab the sum insured from my insurance policy and format in a way where I've got dollar signs and numbers. And then in terms of that claim estimate number, which is this value in my claims record, again, I want it to display with a dollar value and commas and decimal points. So if you ever get frustrated on your dollar values not displaying properly, use this connector. It is one of Audrey's legacies. So yeah, shout out to Audrey, and thank you, Audrey, for creating this, because it has literally saved a lot of tearing out of your hair for other makers and citizen developers in our community. And then the very last action is posting the adaptive card as the bot in a channel. So what we're doing in here is we're essentially selecting a Teams action where we can post it as a bot to a channel, as well as to members in that particular channel. Now, one tip that I do want to share with you with adaptive cards is that if you use it as is, in other words, if you send the card like this, that's cool, but it's not going to notify anyone in your team. So there's an additional piece of string or text that you need to put in here, which I'll go through next. Okay, so remember what I said earlier, once you're done creating your adaptive card in the Adaptive Cards Designer, you can copy and paste it into here, and then you can connect the dots in terms of the things that you need to fill out. So with the key value pairs, so in other words, the facts where I'm saying, show me the member, show me the insurance policy, we can now make references to the other actions that we provided in our flow. So in here, I'm making a reference to the name of the member. And so that's why our second action is getting the member row so that we can get to the name of the member. And then again, the second one is getting the insurance policy. So the number of the insurance policy so we can display it in the Teams notification. And then we also have the policy type. So what is the name of that policy that this member is submitting a claim for? And then we can see the dollar amount. So in other words, the sum insured and the claim estimate. Now, the additional piece of text that I do want to talk about in terms of providing the @mention is this tag in here. So let me just copy this and we'll go ahead and bring it Notepad so I can show you what this looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in. Can I zoom in? Yes, I can. We've got this funky looking string. Again, it's not scary, I promise. And these are what we call tags. So the tag that you want to use is AT, and then at the end of your value that you want to display, you use it, and then you've got a backslash. So this bit that you're seeing in here, again, is the reference for the particular user. So if you want to @mention a user, you would do that. So what you would do, if I just go back in here, is you could grab the GUIDs of your users. So one way that you can do that is using the previous method that I told you, that I shared with you in the previous Cloudflow, where you grab the team and then you loop through the team members and then you grab the IDs of the users. But in this method, I just want to show you another method where you could just explicitly reference the IDs of the particular users. And this is useful if you know that it's not going to ever change, or if it does change, again, you can use environment variables. So to do that, you can grab their ID, but this ID is different in a way where it's from their Office 365 profile. Okay, so that's how you would do an @mention, and this again is new functionality that was provided earlier this year where you can now do @mentions in adaptive cards. Then we've got the standard insurance claim options, call to actions, where they can view the insurance claim or they can view the insurance policy. So what I'll do is I'll head over to, again, Christy, and we'll go ahead and see this in action. So I'll choose a different member. So let's go with Start Industries. I go to insurance and then I click New Insurance Claim. And then I'm going to go ahead and select the insurance policy that applies to that member. So let's go with public liability, and then I go ahead and select a date that the claim was raised for. And let's say they're going to raise a claim for 100 million, and it requires an assessor. Okay, so as Christy, the claims advisor, I've created this, I've escalated it by saying, hey, this claim needs an assessor. So let's head back to my Power Automate and see if it's ran. Okay, so it's just running. So what I'm going to do is head over to my browser where I'm logged in as an assessor. And let's say I'm working away, I'm in Teams, and we should see a notification appear shortly. Cool. Oh, I think it's already done that. All right, 9:21. So a notification will pop up on the right, and it's going to notify the assessor because they've been tagged through that @mention technique, and the other assessor is Adele. And then, as you can see, all of the information is displayed here on the right in terms of what I've dynamically set up in my Cloudflow. So if I just go back to my Cloudflow, just a reminder, when we look at the actual adaptive card action itself, it's essentially the fact set, or in other words, the key value pairs that I've defined in here. And if I go back to, if I go back to my browser where we've got Teams, again, you can see that these numbers are beautifully formatted, and that's because of that format number connector. And same process in here. If they click on review claim, it's going to open up a brand new browser tab, and that's because I'm not in the model driven app, so it's not going to launch the model driven app within Teams. It's going to open up a brand new browser tab, and then saying back in here, if I click on the review member insurance policy, that's now going to take me to the member's insurance policy, and I can view that information in there. So those are the two types of low code notifications that you can do. So I'm just going to go back to my slide. The other option is what we call Outlook actionable cards. Now, I couldn't get those working in my trial environment because the IP was being blocked. So I was trying to work with support to unblock it, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm sorry. However, again, if you get your phone out and if you scan the QR code that's on the right-hand side, we have another MVP, Priyesh, in our community who's actually blogged about it. So this is useful for companies who don't yet have Microsoft Teams and still prefer to work with emails. You can use Outlook actionable messages. So if I just head back to adaptive cards and I just go to this browser tab, it's pretty much this option in here. And it works in a similar fashion, except this time it's not going to send it to Teams, it's going to send it to Outlook. So that's another option that you can use. A, if you don't use Microsoft Teams, or B, if you want to continue doing notifications by email. Okay, in terms of the learning material and how you can get started beyond this Zero to Hero session, again, I've got some other community folk who I think you should pay attention to and go ahead to the blog to learn more about it. So the first one is Sarah. So Sarah is based in Sweden. And the blog post that you want to read is this one. So in here, she goes into detail of how you can configure it in Power Automate. Another person in our community who has done a similar blog post is David. So I think David is based in the United States. So again, scan the QR code on the right. I will provide all of this on my Twitter after this session ends. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I will provide these same links on my Twitter feed. Then we've got Lynn. So Lynn is another MVP who's based in New Zealand, who's gone through Ivan's in-app notification builder tool and Xroom Toolbox. And then if you want to download the Xroom Toolbox as well as play around with the in-app notification builder, you could do so by downloading it through this webpage. And then for the official documentation, you can go to here, and it's going to give you a breakdown of all the different fields that are within the in-app notification preview. And then lastly, if you want to learn about adaptive cards, and I encourage you to do so because it is such a great way of pushing information or data or streamlining processes to your end users in Microsoft Teams, please check out Audrey Gordon's video on how you can get started with adaptive cards. She does have later videos that show new features that have since come in for adaptive cards, but this is the one video that I recommend to watch and start out with if you want to learn adaptive cards and use it within Microsoft Teams. Okay, so I'm gonna head over and have a look at the questions, or Victor, if you've been moderating, if you want to tell me about questions that people have asked, go ahead. No? Otherwise, thanks so much for attending. I feel like I rambled on. I hope you learned a lot from this session. And yeah, please subscribe to me on YouTube. So I'm just going to go and check the messages now. And Victor, if you can come off mute and just share with me what people have been asking.
I am here. I think the first one, it was from Andre. He was wondering if you could share the link to the tool you used for building adaptive cards.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, let's do that now. So it'll be this link. Okay, were there any other questions? I'm just scrolling up. And oh wow, there's been a lot of chatter. Okay.
People were really impressed. I think that's the only question that was unanswered. I think everything else, either myself or even or other members of the community replied
Okay.
on the chat window. Is there anybody who wants to unmute and maybe ask a question if I missed um, any of those? I think that's all we got.
Oh, Foyen's here. Hi, Foyen. Thanks so much for joining from Ireland. Thank you. It's nice to see you in here.
Yeah, everybody's pretty much
Okay. So one thing I do want to cover, if we still have time, I just remembered I forgot to share something that was quite informative. So I'm just going to go back to this Cloudflow. So in my get insurance policy row, sorry, I forgot to talk about this, the expand query. I don't know if some of you, again, know about this underrated capability with Dataverse, but essentially it allows you to pull columns from related tables. So what do I mean by this? If I head back to my model driven app and we have a look at an insurance policy, in an insurance policy, we've got a lookup column of insurance policy type. And when I click on this, that's where we store the name of that insurance policy type. So in my Cloudflow, rather than doing another get row to get the insurance policy type table, I'm using the technique of expand query. So again, this looks a bit scary, but it's not. So let me just quickly head over to my slides and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let me just go back. Okay, so when you're working with related tables in Dataverse, like I mentioned, you can go down an extra layer to grab a column. And to do that, we use what we call expand. So in terms of the backend, when you're calling that API, this is what it looks like, but I promise you, it's not scary. So I'm going to go ahead and explain it next. So I'm just going to grab the last part of this path that you see on the top bit, and I'm going to break it down. So over the left-hand side, we've got a reference to the insurance policy table, and it's in its plural name. And then number 2 is that lookup column from the insurance policy table. So just to remind you what that looks like, if we go back in here and we just go back a step, this is my insurance policy table. That's that lookup column. So again, let's go back to my slides. And then what we're saying is only pull through the name of that insurance policy. So that's what this is. So when you work with the expand concept in that get row action in Power Automate, this is essentially what it is. You're pretty much defining, this is the source table. So I know the other words, if I go back to my Power Automate, that's my source table. So insurance policies. And then as part of my expand reference, I'm saying, grab this lookup column, which is my insurance policy type. And then from that insurance policy type table, which is the related table, I want you to grab the name. And so that's how in my Teams Teams adaptive card, so let me just go back, we can grab the name of the insurance policy type. So yeah, that's an extra bonus learning tip. I probably should make a WTF episode on that, so all of you makers and citizen developers can follow. But yeah, I've just thrown in a lot of knowledge nuggets, so hopefully you guys, have learned some good stuff.
We did one run on Dataverse, actually, the first lesson and the third. And in the third one, we looked at Web API, syntax, and commands. So if you still have questions, of course, you can look up all the information that Elisa has on her own blogs and materials. Also, you can go to lesson 3, and then we talk about it, how to use those commands, the Web API commands in the connectors. So that could help as well. But thank you. That was really good. Piece by piece and outlining all the
Yeah.
parts. That's great. That's great knowledge. Well, we are at the end of this lesson. Next week we are going to connect again at 1:30 Mountain Time.
Yes.
Alexa will be talking about
AI Builder.
filter. Yeah,
I'm excited. And the reason why I'm excited is because you're going to see some functionality in advance of it being released in the following week. So I do have permission from Joe Fernandez, who is the program manager from the AI Builder team. He was like, yeah, go ahead. You can talk about it in your Zero to Hero session next week. So please do come along and see, one of the cool new features that is being released for AI Builder. And I'm excited to show it to you all. So see you there. Thanks for joining, and thanks Ivan for being here today and answering any information on your beautiful in-app notification builder tool in XRM Toolbox. I guess I should make a video on that as well. So again, subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll be able to learn more of it in there from me. But thanks for joining, and bye. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Alice. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.